Hello again, eighth grade. I am looking forward to sharing a little bit more on the subject of forgiveness with you guys as we continue to read the Count of Monte Cristo. I also want to point out that in your survey today, do please make sure you mention what specific things have been helpful, encouraging. Also mention the things that you're like, hey, I need some help with this, or maybe you could try this idea, Miss Carrier. I'm open to that, just as long as you're respectful and you give constructive criticism. That's fine for you to go ahead and tell me what things are maybe not working or confusing. Okay, I'm not going to get offended by that. We're all trying this out and working on this together. I do miss you all. I am going to continue to miss you all as we continue to do this online. But again, feel free to contact me. Also, feel free to come to those Thursday meetings from 12 to 1 so that we can, connect a little bit face to face as well. And I hope that you guys are taking care of yourselves and making sure that you get outside and you spend time with people as much as possible. So let me start us off in prayer and then I will dive right in. Okay, bow your heads. Dear Lord, thank you for being good and for having your true purposes, your good purposes in everything. And I ask that you would continue to grant wisdom and discernment and compassion to leaders and officials and to each one who is involved in this community, especially, and in our nation and around the world. I ask that you would give us a true sense of what is important, of how to live out the ordinary day to day in a way that glorifies you, in a way that depends on you, that recognizes our dependence on you. I ask that you would encourage each student, that you would draw them to yourself, that you would fill them with your spirit, that you would help us as we day to day mess up, hour to hour, how we need you each hour, and how your grace is sufficient for us in all of that. It is enough. You know that we are dust. You know that we are weak. And you have already paid the price for weakness, for sin, for suffering. And you promise to make us new and to carry us through these things. Thank you for being our good shepherd, for not being the way that we are, in that we are quick to be angry or frustrated. Um, Lord, you are slow to anger and you're abounding in love and mercy, and I want to thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so in Mere Christianity, we've been talking a little bit about forgiveness because that really goes along with the topic theme in the Count of Monte Cristo of revenge. Now, the last time I read some sections where Lewis was talking about, yes, forgiveness is difficult. And he's not coming from it as, yeah, you just need to flip a switch and get over it. He says forgiveness is difficult for him as well. And there are certain situations where he can't imagine it being easy at all to forgive. And he knows that he would struggle as well. He's not saying what he can do. He's saying what Christianity says, what is true. He says, I can't do anything on my own strength. And then he looks at that command and he's like, okay, how can we think about this? And he talks about, all right, well, first start small. Start with trying to forgive the people around you for those small offenses. And that's going to keep you busy for quite a while. And then he also clarifies what forgiveness is and isn't. So forgiveness is not saying what the person did doesn't matter. It's not saying that the person is not at fault. It's not saying that the other person is perfect. Okay. But really, he says, okay, well, if we're supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves, let's look at it from that perspective. What do I think of myself? Can I still see the ugly, terrible, bad things that I do? Yes, I do. Do I still like to think of myself as, the best that I can? Yes. Okay, so he's talking about really giving people um, kind of a fair shot at first, okay? Now, he takes it a little bit further after spinning off of the saying of, you hate the sin but not the sinner. And he says this. He says, "For a long time, I used to think this a silly straw-splitting distinction. How could you hate what a man did and not hate the man? But years later, it occurred to me that there was one man to whom I had been doing this all my life, namely myself. However much I might dislike my own cowardice or conceit or greed, I went on loving myself. There had never been the slightest difficulty about it. In fact, the very reason why I hated the things was that I loved the man. Just because I loved myself, I was sorry to find that I was the sort of man who did those things. Consequently, Christianity does not want us to reduce by one atom the hatred we feel for cruelty and treachery. We ought to hate them. Not one word of what we have said about them needs to be unsaid. But it does not want us to hate them in the same way in which we hate the things in ourselves, being sorry that the man should have done such things and hoping, if it is any way possible, that somehow, sometime, somewhere, he can be cured and made human again. The real test is this. Suppose one reads a story of filthy atrocities in the paper. Then suppose that something turns up suggesting that the story might not be quite true or not quite so bad as it was made out. If one's first feeling is, "Oh, thank God, even they aren't quite so bad as that," or is it a feeling of disappointment and even a determination to cling to the first story for the sheer pleasure of thinking your enemies as bad as possible? If it is the second, then it is, I am afraid, the first step in a process which, if followed to the end, will make us into devils. You see, one is beginning to wish that black was a little blacker. If we give that wish its head, later on we shall wish to see gray as black, and then to see white itself as black. Finally, we shall insist on seeing everything, God and our friends and ourselves included, as bad, and not to be able to stop doing it. We shall be fixed forever in a universe of pure hatred. Now, a step further. Does loving your enemy mean not punishing him? I think Edmond Dantes would at least find this interesting, whether he agreed or not. No, for loving myself does not mean that I ought not to subject myself to punishment, even to death. If you had committed a murder, the right Christian thing to do would be to give yourself up to the police. Right. So then he talks about that for a little bit and relates it to wartime. And then towards the end of this chapter, he says, "We may punish if necessary, but we must not enjoy it." In other words, something inside us, the feeling of resentment, the feeling that wants to get one's own back, must simply be killed. I do not mean that anyone can decide this moment that he will never feel it anymore. That is not how things happen. I mean that every time it bobs its head up, day after day, year after year, all our lives long, we must hit it on the head. It is hard work, but the attempt is not impossible. Even while we kill and punish, we must try to feel about the enemy as we feel about ourselves. Now, remember, he's not just talking about punishment, he was talking about being a soldier in war. To wish that he were not so bad, to hope that he may, in this world or another, be cured. In fact, to wish him good. That is what is meant in the Bible by loving him, wishing his good, not feeling fond of him nor saying he is nice when he is not. So you're wanting the best for that person. Okay. So he gives us a really practical test for forgiveness in our heart. And he's also very honest about it as well. So as you continue to read the Count of Monte Cristo, keep letting those thoughts stir around in your noggin. Now, I am going to go ahead and first give you the agenda for today. Then we're going to check our grammar, so make sure that you have that so you can check it before you turn it in. And then we're going to go over today's questions for the guided notes in our reading of To Count of Monte Cristo. All right, I'm going to share my screen. And Today's work, okay? So today what you're going to do is read chapters 37 through 39 and do the guided notes. Okay, we'll go over those Monday. Finish the discussion posts. So we had the repaying good and evil discussion this week, and hopefully the readings from C.S. Lewis help complement what you've been reading in your books. You could also think of stories in scripture where you have, like Joseph and his brothers, and instances of forgiveness like that. And of course, Christ, his forgiveness for all of us. But you've got your own answer plus responding to 2 other classmates. Do that survey. That'll really help me to be able to help you all. And then the weekly grammar check, which we're going to go over in just a moment. Your open book quizzes for next week, chapters 1 through 40 on Tuesday, and then vocabulary lesson 12 on Friday. Okay, and I've graded your previous quizzes if you haven't already checked those or seen them. And if you have any questions, especially since we're not in class together, feel free to ask. It is still okay to ask, hey, I don't know why I missed this one, or I think you missed something here. That's okay for you to bring that up, as long as you do it kindly. That's all I'm asking. And you all pretty much do anyway. You're very sensitive to those kinds of things. So I'm not worried about that. I know sometimes online it can make it a little harder to feel like you can ask questions, but make use of the resources that you do have. I do want you to come to me. I have to email professors and things all the time for clarification online, and sometimes you need that more than when you're in person. So don't let that make you feel like you're stupid or doing something wrong. That's a very normal thing. So just want to reemphasize that for you. All right. Next, I want to pop up um, the grammar, and I'm going to make sure that it's actually working this time, because there we go. Okay, so now you should be able to see that. All right, with the grammar, so we had some more identification. This was really of verbs, trying to review helping verb. Remember, helping verb is that the list, there's about 23 of them. And a lot of time was and were and am and is and are, those to be verbs do function as helping verbs, but there's some others as well. Usually they're used to help create our tenses, and they're often paired with an action verb. Sometimes they're paired with a linking verb, but they help to bring the sentence to full clarity. What I've done on this one, I've color coded. The red is what you need to actually have yourself. The purple, I've just labeled some extra things that may need clarification. You did not have to do that at all. What I've put in purple is just extra things that may bring some clarity to you as we walk through these sentences. I'm also going to post this on the same page as the video so you can have it to check your work as well. Remember, you can handwrite your corrections, or you can do it digitally and just make sure you color code or bold it. That way I know what you've gotten and what you've missed. And I can get a glance at that and see how we need to proceed. So the first sentence says, Emma was slowly creeping behind him. That's talking about my cat, Strider. So yes, I gave you a cat story. I'm sorry. But Strider's my cat. He's very cute. He's not here right now. And then Emma is my sister's cat, and she's extremely playful and young and really laid back, and Strider's a little bit older, and she sometimes beats him up, and it's funny. So Emma is the subject in our first sentence. The helping verb is was, and then the action verb is creeping. Okay, so was creeping would be that verb phrase. Slowly is just an adverb, and it's interrupting that verb phrase. Okay, so was and creeping is the actual verb phrase with the adverb tucked in there. Behind him is the prepositional phrase for you to mark out of the way for you. Okay. Remember, if we get rid of prepositional phrases first, that really helps us to reduce the clutter as we dissect our sentence. Number 2, she crouched low, wiggled her hindquarters, and pounced. She does that a lot. So she is the subject, and then the first action verb is crouched. The second action verb is wiggled, and then the third action verb is pounced. So we have a compound verb in this instance. Now, I went ahead and labeled low as an adverb, just to give you, so how did she crouch? Where did she crouch? That's the adverb low. And then wiggled what? Her hindquarters. If you've seen a cat pounce, you know that they kind of have to psych themselves up to do so. And so that's the direct object. And then I didn't put this, but the and there is a conjunction joining that compound verb, right? The next sentence, Strider is the subject, awoke and sprang are the action verbs, and then I labeled the conjunction there, and, just to remind you that that's called a conjunction. Into the air is our prepositional phrase, and then again we have a compound verb. So two actions going on. When we've got two or more of something, it's compound. So far, we've had what are called simple sentences with compound parts. Remember, a simple sentence is the same thing as an independent clause or a group of words with a subject and a verb that make a complete thought. Okay, we'll talk more about clauses later. So right now, if you're going, I can't remember that, don't freak out. It's okay. We'll loop back around. All right, on number 4. Okay, this one's a little bit more complex, so I'm going to walk you through it a little slower. So first we have Strider and Emma were playfully wrestling on the floor. And then I have the other clause, when I walked into the room. So let's first get rid of those prepositional phrases. So we mark out on the floor and we mark out into the room. And then we're left with Strider and Emma were playfully wrestling. Let's just stop there, okay? So we have Strider and Emma, which are our subjects, okay? And then we have the conjunction joining them. And then what were they doing? Well, they were playfully wrestling. So that gives us our verb phrase with the adverb. Okay, so were is the helping verb, wrestling is the adverb. And then again, we have that interruption, playfully. That tells us how they were playing. Okay. Now let's look at the other part of that. When, that's a special kind of conjunction that we talked about earlier in the year, but I don't expect you to, necessarily remember all of that right now. We're just looking at subjects and verbs. So I is a subject and walk is an adverb, okay? So all you had to put down were the things in red, and then we have a compound subject, Strider and Emma, okay? All right. If you have questions about that one, you can just message me. That's fine for you to ask any questions about that since you can't right now. All right, number 5. Suddenly Emma smacked Strider in the face and walked away. She does that. She starts playing with him, and then when she's done, she hauls off and smacks him, and he looks confused. All right, so Emma is the subject, and then smacked and walked are the things that she did. Those are both action verbs. And in the face, again, that's our prep phrase we need to get rid of. And then I just added in some of our modifiers and complements. So modifier would be adverb, that tells us when, and also away, that tells us where. And then Strider is that complement. It's the direct object, okay, completes the predicate here of smacked. Smacked what? Smacked Strider, okay? Now remember, all you need is subject Emma, adverb, smacked, parentheses around in the face, and then walked, adverb. And this is a compound verb because we have 2 of them. And then finally on number 6, Strider looked confused while Emma hopped up on the couch, curled up, and went to sleep. Okay, so we've got, let's look at the core of our sentence. First, by getting rid of prep phrases. So on the couch, that's a prep phrase there, okay? Now, we're going to go back to this first part where it says Strider looked confused. Let's just stop there. Okay, Strider looked confused because that's a complete thought. Strider is the subject. Looked is your action verb, okay? Now, confused is not a verb, okay? So make sure you don't read so fast and just put that as a verb. Confused there is telling us what? Well, it's telling us how he looked. It is following the verb and referring back to the subject. So actually, looked, it looks like an action verb, right? But is Strider looking? No, he's not looking, okay? So what we would want to say is that looked is actually a linking verb here, okay? So when you, if you pull up this paper on our LMS page, then you'll see that here this is going to be marked as a linking verb. Looked is one of those that you have to see how it works in the sentence to decide if it's action or linking. It's one of those special, sometimes linking verbs. So looked here is going to be a linking verb. How did he look? Confused. Okay, so predicate adjective. You didn't have to label that, but just know that. Okay. Now, while Emma hopped up on the couch, curled up, went to sleep. She does quite a few things here. So Emma is our subject. And then what did she do? She hopped, action verb, curled up, action verb, went, action verb. Okay. Just a little tidbit here, hopped up. Adverb is actually up, telling us where she hopped. Okay. And then to sleep, if you remember right before break, we talked about infinitive, so it's tucked in there as well. You did not have to label it though. This is also, if you notice the while here, and you've got the two sentences joined by while, this is a complex sentence, but all you had to recognize was the compound verb because you have hopped, curled, and went there, okay? All right. So what you can do when you turn this in, you can give me kind of the equivalent of a thumbs up in between down as to how hard this was for you. I like to ask that in class, but obviously I can't do that. So in the description, when you turn this in, if you just want to say, thumbs up in between down on how hard it was for you, or if there's certain ones where you're like, oh, I was completely lost on number 4 and 6. That was really difficult. Then I'll know how to proceed in the future when we go over these together, okay? So hopefully that is helpful to you all. Okay. We are going to go back to our PowerPoints. Okay. And I'm going to close myself off. We have the Count of Monte Cristo. All right, so chapter 34. All right, so how does Villefort react to learning that the Count bought Monsieur de Saint-Méran's house? Remember, that's the house of his first wife's family, but that's also where he had an affair. He cheated on her with Madame Danglars, and they had the little baby boy that he tried to murder. So it is a place full of horrible memories of his own mistakes and his own sin. Now, he's obviously upset and agitated. And this isn't just, oh, I don't like that. He is visibly really troubled and upset. So why does the Count leave the Villeforts, their place? Well, he says that he has an interest in telegraphs, particularly those from Spain. Okay. Now, well, that kind of clues us in to some things that he's orchestrating behind the scenes once again. And Danglars ends up losing 1 million francs. Okay, loses quite a bit of money, and we're going to see how. Well, he received a false report, which led him to sell his Spanish bonds, and that resulted in a loss of 1 million francs. Okay, so this is similar. If you want to think of the stock market, you may have heard your parents or other people, or you may have heard of in the news how the stock markets are doing right now. Some of them, they're really not doing too well. Or if you read about just a really popular time in history in America was the Great Depression when the stock market crashed. You could also think of, speculating or even gambling. I mean, there's some slight, differences depending on, who you talk to. But he had tried to invest some money or to sell some bonds, dealing with big money here, and it ended up being just a really poor decision. He was misled and ended up losing a lot of money. Now, the Count, his new home, the old Saint-Méran house, he's made a lot of changes, given it a lot of updates, except for the one bedroom and the garden. He left them exactly as they were, okay? Now, he's done that for a very particular reason. He notices Debray and Madame Danglars exchanging notes. Okay, so remember, Madame Danglars is not a very devoted wife. She's already had an affair with Villefort, and she's having one with Debray. And when she talks to her husband later, he will be very clear that he's like, listen, I know that you've had a lot of other men besides just me, and I've let it go. And of course, there'll be some controversy over that. The Count, though, he notices everything, watching everyone like a hawk. Here, Bertruccio says that, Villefort's mistress was Madame Danglars. And Bertruccio also reveals that Andrea Cavalcanti is Benedetto. So remember, Benedetto was the baby of Villefort and Madame Danglars that Villefort tried to kill. Bertruccio rescued him and adopted him along with his sister. And then Benedetto grew up to be an outlaw and really just overall a terrible, cruel young man who ended up killing Bertruccio's sister and Benedetto's adoptive mother with a bunch of his friends for the sake of some money. Benedetto is also, so as Andre Cavalcanti, he has been hired by the Count to pretend to be this fine young gentleman who has been reunited with his long-lost father. Okay, so really what the Count did was picked a rogue and a scam artist to help him in enacting out his vengeance. Now, the Count upsets Madame Danglars and Monsieur de Villefort. He has people over to his home. And what he does is he takes them around the house and he shows them the room where their son was born and the spot where he was buried. And the Count also starts to weave in some uncomfortable details about his experiences with the house and these particular rooms. So someone else during this time discovers or already knows Andrea Cavalcanti's true identity, and that's Caderousse. Okay, remember Caderousse was the one bribed by the diamond to get all of the, to give all of the information out to um, Abbe Bussini, aka Edmond, and then Caderousse killed his wife and the jeweler and ran off with the diamond and the money. So he's not a very great fella, and he has obviously met Andrea. They probably run in similar circles, doing the roguish, murderous theft that they do. And so Cadaros and Benedetto, aka Andrea Cavalcanti, make an arrangement. Benedetto is going to pay Cadaros monthly to keep his secret. So, in other words, Cadaros blackmails Andrea, and Andrea starts to give him hush money in order to preserve his identity. All right, so we are going to pick up on chapter 37 on Monday. I hope this was helpful to you all. I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful, restful weekend. Let me know if you need anything, and I will talk to you all soon. Have a wonderful weekend again. Bye bye.